Bom dia a todos. Eu sou a Flávia, eu sou a Head de Marketing aqui do Waze e estou muito feliz com a presença de todo mundo. A gente quis fazer um café da manhã bem exclusivo, então a gente convidou apenas os colaboradores do The Compass, o pessoal que está ali atrás. Obrigada pela presença. E alguns dos nossos parceiros, né, mais próximos, para ouvir a Di-Ann. Di-Ann, I'm going to switch to English, okay?
Okay.
Okay. So that she can...
Thank you.
Okay. So Di-Ann is our Director of Growth, and she's been working with Waze since 2009. She was the first employee in US, and we are very glad to have you here and having you here as the first person to come to talk in what we are calling the Compass Inside series. So it's a series of talks of very inspirational executives, very inspirational scientists who will help us inspire also you and how you guys are thinking about your business. So with no further ado, with you, Di-Ann.
Thank you. I'm going to use this. Okay, thank you for coming. I hope that this is going to be relevant to all of you. I've spent the last several years thinking primarily about growth, because in the mobile world, growth is how you survive, making sure that you have as many users as possible, using you as often as possible. And as we've evolved, that's looked very different, and particularly as it integrates with our traditional ideas around marketing. So I should start by saying that everything we've ever done at Waze since the beginning has been about going back to our core mission of saving people 5 minutes a day, every day, by getting around traffic. And whether it's a growth strategy or a marketing campaign, no matter what it is, a feature from the product, we all tie back up to that. And at the core of everything is this community. And so we have about 500,000 map editors around the world, which comprise this community. And without them, we would really be nowhere. And so every time we do something, if we need to learn something about what's happening in Brazil, whether it's a flood, whether it's a protest, often that information is surfaced by this community. So that's kind of the core. And you know, for you guys specifically, I wanted to start thinking about what is the role of growth within marketing. And so this is how I started thinking about it recently. We've got mission here, as I mentioned. We've got the community. And everything we do is about connecting those two things. And we have tools. We have distribution. We have PR. We have user communications inside of the app, push notifications. I'm going to go through some of these examples. But growth is really about quantifying and the data around these things, and it's a kind of a glue. Well, anyway, it's the data and the glue. There was this cute thing. Anyway, doesn't matter. There it is. So if you think about how growth fits in to this notion of really communicating your mission and to your community, that's what it is. This is a very old slide from 2009, and there wasn't even a term growth. Right? This was just about launching an app in 2009. There were no growth teams anywhere. People were still thinking about marketing. We didn't have that luxury because we didn't have any budget. But you know, if you look at this acceleration curve, it's continued. But as it's continued, we've had to think about things in a much more data-driven way, because the complexity when you're dealing with 10 million, 50 million, 80 million users is very, very different, and our strategies have needed to change. So I wanted to share with you 5 principles of how we approach growth. And so after this slide ends is where we start thinking about growth. Before that, it was just hoping that anyone liked what you were doing. All right, principle number 1. Growth is a culture. And this is something very interesting because in a marketing organization, you probably feel, or as marketers, that the company is not bowing down to your culture, right? You might have conflicting ideas, conflicting cultures. And when you're dealing in mobile, you really need to have this mindset that whether you're in sales or engineering, that everything has to be connected into a culture of growth where everybody is pushing toward the same goal and the same set of ideas. And so the way we look at it, we have these several teams that are all under the umbrella of growth. So actually marketing is a subset of growth inside of Waze. And business development, all the work we do with broadcasters and connected citizens, that's all part of growth. New business initiatives. And then we have a very small kind of like tiny growth team, which does a lot of the analytics. But at the core of all of this is the analytics, the R&D, the product, the operations. Everybody inside of Waze is a part of this. So people that don't report into our org from every part of the company are represented. And here's why. Anyone can make a decision that can make your growth numbers dive. And so this is an example of something that happened a while ago before we were kind of core to everything, which is that one of the analysts made a decision to change a radius, a tiny radius in the push notification, and the number of notifications we sent out to our users, which is a primary driver of our growth, decreased by 65%. One decision by one person, and then you can imagine what happened to our monthly active users that month. So that doesn't happen anymore because everyone is well aware. All right, second principle. The metrics may change throughout the life cycle of your brand or your product, but that core funnel doesn't. And, I'm just going to give a couple of examples of what some of our core metrics have been over the years. So something called the magic number. We wanted to understand this golden flow. If any of you have mobile apps, you probably are familiar with this golden flow. This is what you hope your users do, right? This is when your users are engaging with the parts of your app that you're spending the most time creating. It's what value you hope to provide to people. And so this magic number is something we looked at to figure out how many drives per month before people started really getting the value of Waze. And so we looked at all of the different features, whether it was searching, getting it in ETA, driving, whatever it was. And we realized that if you drive 0 to 4 times per month, you're very erratic and you're not getting any value from Waze. As soon as you hit 5 drives per month, all the way up to 50, 100 drives per month, you start looking the same. You exhibit the same behaviors. Once we realized that, we decided that our core metric for that period of time was going to be getting as many people as possible to drive 5 times or more per month. And because we focused on it, we moved it. So I think when we started this, it was something like maybe 27% of our user base. And by the time we created some initiatives to address this, it was nearly 50%. So whatever you focus on is the metric you're going to move. And I'm sure you're familiar with this concept, but in the mobile world, it kind of brings it to life even more importantly. Then we started looking at velocity. And velocity for us was primarily around monthly active users at that time. And what is the trajectory of the growth? And at that moment, we really wanted to see it country by country because that's when we realized that it looked very different. You might have some places where you're growing 2,500% and some places where you're only growing 5%. So we needed to begin to have strategies that would connect in these different places based on the maturity of our product in the market. Here is our funnel, very familiar to you guys, starting with awareness. Acquisition, onboarding, engagement, retention with its cousin churn, and then referrals. Over here, you can see how I think we're doing against all of those. We haven't ever done really, this kind of invite a friend stuff, so we're just starting that now. But the core of our activities are right here, the onboarding and the engagement. We're beginning to work more here, but again, it really depends on the maturity and the life cycle of your own brand or your own mobile application specifically, because this is all fairly mobile-centric. I think that the ideas coming from mobile are starting to be extended into more and more products in the physical world. But anyway, another thing that we do is called the expected outcomes. Expected outcomes is a very, very simple analysis, but it shows how rigorous we are. We need to understand in a forecasted method how much growth we expect. And we need to dig down and say where we expect that growth to come from. Is it a specific campaign? Is it a specific feature? And then if we don't hit it, what's the gap and why? And so an expected outcomes could be, for a single feature, we think it's going to drive X million users. It might take 10, 15 minutes only to come up with this expected outcomes, but then after, we measure it rigorously and figure out how we did, and we get smarter and smarter. But that discipline is really important because we shouldn't spend any time developing anything. We don't have 5 extra minutes. We're still a team of under 350 people. We don't have 5 minutes to waste on something our users don't want. Which brings me to principle number 3. Optimize and experiment relentlessly. Everyone on my team is completely addicted to numbers. And that funnel I just mentioned, if you're not measuring it, it's like throwing a bunch of stuff into a tornado and hoping that driven kilometers or monthly active users will fall out of the bottom. And that's how we used to behave until not that long ago. Anyway, then if you can add a very good experimentation framework, how do you A/B test every message that you send out? How do you define a control group against everything that you're doing? It's a campaign, it's a feature, literally everything. We now have a fantastic experimentation framework that allows us to understand whatever we put into the tornado, what is coming out. Again, we have no time to put things that don't work in. So the experimentation framework allowed us to take that tornado and turn it into a funnel that actually works. In growth, there's a very important concept called inches, because when you think about optimization, you think about everything we do, 80% of the time, we're just trying to get a little inch. We're just trying to do a tweak that can make a big impact. Only 20% of the time are we thinking about miles, the new products, the big new features, the flashy stuff. But it's those inches that really define growth. Some of the things that fit into this notion of inches are things like App Store optimization, or driving down your user acquisition costs, or how you expose people to your features. What's the first feature they should hear about when they download your app or start using your product? What's the first benefit they should see? And then in what period of time should they understand more? Those kinds of things. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. In the first 3 quarters of last year, we did 72 experiments just on App Store optimization, just on actually the Android store, on the Play Store. And we did them in 20 languages, and success rate for us is, were the results good enough that we should roll it out to 100% of the people? Well, 70% of those tests we actually thought were good enough to roll out. And it's so weird. Human behavior is just ridiculous. You're marketers, so you know this. So this is the Waze icon that was on the App Store everywhere. It was just that icon. And we said, all right, let's just try to add a little flag onto each icon based on which store it is in, and see if it makes any difference. Half the time, we're just wandering in the dark, right? It's some percentage science, and it's a lot coming up with these experiments is art. All right, so we did this test. And you're thinking, no one's really going to care, but let's try it anyway. Actually, it drove 12% increase in monthly organic installs in the Canadian App Store. In Brazil, where we have a huge amount of users, it drove another 1%, just from adding a flag. So you never know what's going to work, but that's an example of an inch that made a huge difference in the number of people that are accessing our app. I'll give you another example, and I'm going to kind of stick with the theme of localization here. So that was about the flag. Then the way we used to approach translations for the App Store or an ad campaign was one-to-one. We come up with something in English, and it's translated by our community members one time, 1-for-1. Then we decided, since we love testing so much, let's have them give us 4 or 5 translations for each one, and then let's retest those to see in which language people, in the specific language, which message is going to resonate the most. And look, here. It's really, again, this is all incremental organic installs and registers. Russian, 6%, just because we were able to test multiple translations. And it really comes down to this. I love this quote. If you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to him in his language, that goes to his heart. And this is the way we try to approach local marketing as Waze. And it's not just in the way that we advertise or market, but it's in the products that we develop. So here in Brazil, I'll just use this example, license plate-based routing. So this is apparently a very, very big deal in Sao Paulo. Our users told us this. So we built the ability, a feature that allows you to add your license plate number and navigate through the center of the city on the right days of the week at the right time based on this. So we added this last year, and the results were mind-blowing. Of course, we did our expected outcomes, and we expected active users of about just under 400,000. It was almost 1 million. People loved this feature. And because this is everything we thought, we knew that this was a huge success. We thought maybe 40,000 people would give us their license plate number, 500,000. This is just in the first month. It's much higher now. So these things are driving engagement. So we continue to try to get as local as possible, whether it's our features or whatever. But again, this all comes back to not having a lot of resources. This is something that's scalable. We're now rolling this out to 7 other countries that have similar restrictions for their drives. And today, or this week sometime, we're continuing and launching this because there's a new headlight regulation. So as you approach where the regulation comes into play, we actually give this to you to remind you. It keeps the community safer. It reinforces everything that we're doing. So we're just going to keep going and try to better understand the local driving behaviors and try to optimize. Just take a minute for the miles, because the miles are actually more fun. Most of what we do is the inches, but the miles are way more fun. Okay, user communications. For us, this is push notifications. It's those encouragements you see inside of the app. It's any way that we can actually communicate with our users through digital means. This is an example of one push notification. And I should note, I'm really proud of the work we're doing. If you are in mobile, then you know that a push notification is a catch-22. It can be a tremendous way to drive usage, but can also, if you annoy people, you can never talk to them again because they're just going to either uninstall you, worst case, or at the very least, shut off push notifications. So we want to make sure that that doesn't happen. We test every single message that goes out against a control group. And only roll it out if it doesn't just impact actives, because that could just mean someone's opening it, but if it impacts drives. And again, it's by engagement group as well, so whether inactive, commuter, or super commuter, based on our groups. We only roll it out if it's impacting drives, because then we know it added some value. So this was a Thanksgiving message, and you can see that in most groups, it didn't just increase active users, but increase drivers. Every single time we send a message, we do this test. An example of distribution. So some of you may have seen on Global that they use Waze for traffic information in the morning. This is an example of what happened when we launched with this partner in Argentina. We went from number 50 in the App Store to number 1. That was that 2,500% growth that you saw. 1. So these really are miles. And now that program is live in 250 TV and radio stations around the world. So that's made a huge impact. That's an example of what we mean by miles. And it didn't take a lot of effort to test it. It was just do it with a couple of partners. If it works, then you can begin to invest in tweaking the product to make sure that it's geared for broadcasters. Another example of a mile that we launched last year is something called the Transport SDK. This is something that is embedded in any on-demand delivery app, ride-sharing service. 99 is a partner of ours, so you may have experienced it there. And it's very simple. It's app switching. But for most on-demand apps, they don't have the money to create fantastic routing or fantastic ETA or map service. So they use ours. And we launched with only 7 partners, and then within a few weeks had 4,000 leads. 4,000 people came to a website, filled out a form, and said, please give me this SDK. Then we realized it was worth investing in a more scalable solution that we could roll out to many people. Now we're live in about 2030, but the interesting part is that it drives 4% of our driven kilometers per month. This is one of our key metrics. 4% is huge. We're talking about billions of kilometers every month. And so that for us, again, a mile. So when we identify these miles, we turn them into scalable programs. This is an example of 99. They have these rooms where they train all of their drivers to use Waze because they're motivated by making sure that they have the most efficient route. So everybody makes more money that way. One other example of a mile is how do you extend the use case of your product? And so Waze is really known for traffic. But we want to be your kind of co-pilot that's going all the way from when you're thinking about driving somewhere to when you actually reach your destination. So we introduce things like parking. But this is called planned drives. I don't know, how many of you here have used the planned drive feature? Awesome. Okay, good. Oh, actually, you're mostly Wazers. Okay. Okay, the rest of you have to try it. 40% of our users want to drive immediately, 60% want to drive later. So now you go in, you press the later button, and you can see how long it will take you based on the time of day. And this changed the use case. That means that I can check things, I can plan even before I start my drive. That means that the same person can use Waze 2, 3, 4 times more than they would otherwise. And just to show you how much people love it, this is an example of several different messages on a push notification. This one is around when we started telling people about planned drives. They loved it. They wanted to know. And it even increased the use of the feature itself. So you get the idea that we are addicted to measuring everything. Now let's talk about some internal politics and operations. The next principle is to rebel against ourselves, to change the way we do things, to constantly challenge ourselves. You know those meetings where a head of product is sitting with the head of business and they're fighting over their opinions about what feature to launch? Try not to have those conversations anymore because we can test everything. So one great example is the sign-up flow. Our design team said, make sure that it's a very long and painful sign-in flow. They didn't say that. That's how I felt it. Because then we're going to get the best users. We're going to get the ones who are very engaged, not the ones who will be fly-by-nighters. All right, so here's what we made you do. Okay, click to accept these terrible terms, add a phone number, wait for an SMS, add a code, sign up for Facebook while you're at it. Here's your Wazer. Why don't you do all of this? Let's get married before we even go on a date. I was fighting this fight for a year before we were able to test it. And now there's no more debating. It's, let's test it. This is a new sign-in flow that we tested. It's so simple and smooth. And the whole idea of the debate, is it going to work? Will it not work? We'll test it. So we tested it, and not only did it drive more new users, but a higher percentage of them became drivers. They had a chance to experience the app before we made them suffer through this kind of process. And who cares if you're connected to Facebook anyway? So, problem solved, debate finished, more users, happy days. And the final principle is, what is the point of all of this data? What else can we do with it? So, of course, it's great to use it to increase your users, but with all of this, what's next? And this is what gets me very, very excited. We started a program called the Connected Citizens Program, and it was actually started first in Rio, because Mayor Pais at that time said, please use my city as a lab. They were getting ready for Pope Francis to visit, and it was nerve-wracking for them. So he said, get Waze into my traffic operations center within like 2 days. So we got it set up. They were the first city to have Waze inside of their traffic operations center. And literally, they could see for the first time what was happening where in their city. So they felt safer about what was happening with the Pope. The other interesting thing is that nobody could show the route the Pope was going to take until it happened, because that would have been a security risk. So we had one of our community members literally sitting in the traffic operations center, closing the roads live as soon as he was going, so that no one would be routed through it. And so this kind of city partnership became a data exchange where we're giving incidents and closures only, nothing related to personal information. The cities give that back to us, and we're doing some pretty amazing things. Right now, we're working with over 200 governments, all started in Rio, and that represents 1 billion citizens. 1 billion citizens now have access to an improved city because of very simple data that they never had access to before. I'll just give you a couple of examples of what that means. So in Jakarta, there are 2 million commuters per day that are going through the center of the city. It's a highly congested, crazy place. They decided to try license plate routing because they learned about it in Sao Paulo from being part of this program. And because they instituted it, we were able to reduce travel times by 19%. In a city the scale and size of Jakarta. Insane. Now, when a city normally does a pilot program, they don't know if it's working or not. They just kind of feel, I think it's doing well, or they send someone out to count cars. Imagine trying to count that, right? This is a very tough thing to do. But they could roll it out within a month because they knew that it was working. I'll give you another example. This is also Rio, a city of 6.3 million people that needed to add 1 million people visiting for the Olympics. Imagine that traffic management nightmare. They needed to make a much bigger change. The change was that they actually had to add new roads. And they used our data to figure out where to put those roads. They added 3 new highways. And again, now they can tell if it's effective or not, their strategies. Even if people who spend billions of dollars, you say, oh, I can help you measure that. Sometimes they say, oh, we don't want to know, right? So cities are now accountable. Decrease in congestion and morning commute, Rio, 27%. Because of those highways. Now they have the confidence to know what's working. It's not just traffic congestion. In the US, we're used in emergency response centers as well. And one of the fascinating things about this is that 70% of crashes in the US are reported on Waze before 911. 911 is slow if they're ever getting the information. So we never imagined that Waze would be used for solving problems related to reporting crashes. But the emergency responders tell us that it's 4 to 7 minutes faster, that they can arrive on the scene of an incident because of this information. So that's what else we can do with this data, and that's what gets me jumping and excited. And so 5 minutes a day every day now can look like millions of hours every day because we're looking at the city scale. And this may not sound like marketing, but that combination of marketing and growth really working to drive something that becomes bigger and bigger and bigger is pretty neat. We're taking that a community approach also to our governments. This is 175 of our Connected Citizens partners that gathered together in Paris last year to share ideas, share case studies, share code, share visualizations. So the idea is that you don't just take a pilot in Jakarta and roll it out in Jakarta. You take a pilot in Jakarta and you roll it out in every city in the world. So that's what this sharing is really bringing together. So just a quick recap of the 5 points. Growth is a culture. Key metrics change, but the funnel doesn't. Optimize and experiment relentlessly. Rebel against ourselves. And what else can you be doing with that data you're collecting? Those are my 5 principles as it relates to Waze. Now, I want to talk about culture for one quick sec. Do you guys know that this is what Waze used to look like? Our first version of the product was a blank white map, and you saw yourself driving. I would much rather have 10 people who loved this crazy experience than 1,000 that just leave right away. And something interesting about how Waze has always communicated with people is that we never say, we're the best. We say, you know what, we have this big vision and let's do it together. It's infused in our product, it's infused in our culture. And, you know, it's a kind of crazy acceptance of things that might seem silly, but it's about tapping into something that's a much deeper connection. It's a very human thing, even though we're talking about traffic management. And so as I look now where we're going, it's not just this, which was my sense of growth, I want to say, only until about a month ago. But a month ago, I started thinking about this big green block here, which is the cultural part. What is the social contract that we have with our users? What's the culture we have internally? Because that's the same stuff we're putting out there with our users. You know, I think of Waze as kind of one big community. There's our core community that you heard me talking about before, but Andre is part of that community. And so is every single person who's used Waze. We're trying to do something bigger. And so culture is becoming this glue that takes us from someone who does data analysis and PR to really that center part there, which is the culture. It's what we're trying to communicate with our users in a much stronger way. And I don't know if you've heard about a lot of the stuff going on in Silicon Valley right now about some spoiled CEOs behaving badly and all of this. But I think culture becomes even more important. And so as we're thinking about our brands, I just want to leave you with this idea that maybe our companies can build not just products and businesses worth scaling, but culture's worth scaling. Because our users, our consumers, our customers will feel it. And that's what I hope we can all do together. Thank you.
Obrigada, Di-Ann. Thank you. Guys, we still have some time with Di-Ann. Now's the time that we are opening for questions. Okay.
Thank you so much. Okay, thank you so much. I'm so excited to see your concern with the real impact on the lives of people. That's pretty much it, the social impact. But I have to ask, I live in São Paulo, so the new mayor, he created a new department for innovation and technology.
I know.
You know that. That's Daniel Annenberg. He's a great guy. I hope you're in touch with them.
Yes.
Because they are doing, awesome. That's the first part. The second thing is I'm actually working with some guys from the Singularity University and blah, blah, blah.
Oh, yeah.
EXO works and blah, blah, blah. So I want to share something with you. We are now focusing on cities. We have a new initiative focused on cities called Fast Track. It's in beginning. We're working with...
On your company or Singularity is doing it?
No, it's actually, it was created in Singularity. It's not directly connected. Salim is part of it. Salim Ismail, yep. So Fast Track Institute is working in Medellin. And it's so sad. I wish I had seen that before, because actually that would be a much better solution than what we proposed. But one of the funny things about culture, this is all about culture. When I met our clients, so to speak, in Medellin, one of them said, hey, I want your phone. I said, why? I want to call you. I said, why? And he said something. You were the only Latin American in the team, because the gringos are clueless when it comes to Latin America. So it's the importance of culture. So sometimes somebody comes from some pie in the sky solution that has nothing, no connection at all with the local culture. So congratulations for doing that so well.
Thank you. And offline, I'd love to hear more about Fast Track too.
Oh yeah.
Other questions? Oh, come on. Okay. Here.
Thank you. I love your presentation. I'm very excited about growth, and I really believe in the power of data. If you have some tip in a company that doesn't have like a growth area, how to start? What's the first step to do?
I think there's two parallel first steps. One is, what is the most senior member of your organization that can really embrace the idea of growth and creating a growth culture? Because it is very difficult, especially in a large company, to get everything actually top down works a lot. Like, who's the advocate, the senior level advocate that can support this? So that's one. The second is, the first hire in a growth team, I think, should be a strong data analyst. Someone technical who understands the systems and how to structure the A/B tests in a way that can potentially scale. And even better, who knows how to pull out the insights from your data to make cases that can help you sell these ideas throughout the rest of the company. Because cases made with data are so much more effective than cases made with opinion. So I would say, who's the highest level advocate in the company you can have? And then who's your first data analyst that's technical? You're welcome. Really? Okay, here we go.
So interesting to see how many things are coming. What are the next steps in Brazil? When you say about the community, we discuss a lot of... São Paulo is so big, it's so mixed with different routes and options. And we realize sometimes you have connection with, as you say, the emergency, and how you can connect for the security. One problem we have in Brazil, so having slums in the midway, how you can connect to avoid the suggestions in the traffic options?
So this is something that working in Brazil has helped us think through. And one of the things that we did in Rio, and we haven't figured out how to do it in Sao Paulo yet, is that we have a real-time crime database, only of crime, like violent crimes. And so we can actually tell you if you're approaching an area where there's been recent significant violent crime. So we would never, ever say, oh, you're going through a dangerous neighborhood, because who's to say what's dangerous? Oh, it's because they're poor, right? Like, that's annoying. But where we can get crime data, we actually incorporate that into the routing. And we're trying to get the information. Andre's going to get us the information ASAP from Sao Paulo. We're going to, you'll hear, please don't tweet this, but next week you'll hear about a partnership with Sao Paulo I think it's next week that we're announcing. Yeah. But it's a newer relationship for us, and it takes a while to get in with the security team and innovation and technology and in the CET and. So it's going to take some time to bring all of that together. But I hope that we'll be able to start making an impact in Sao Paulo as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.